Elizabeth Shackelford was a U.S. Department of State official until December 2017. I asked her if she thinks the U.S. and its allies have built up a credible coalition to deter Russian aggression.
I think we're really not going to know the answer to that until push comes to shove and it is time to act. But it does seem as though the United States has done everything in its capacity to get other allies on board. And at this stage, it certainly seems like the efforts and the aggression shown by Russia have had the opposite effect of what has been intended. And that NATO really has come together and is ready to act, if not militarily in Ukraine, then certainly in ways that will make Russia regret that action.
What do you make of the language that's coming out of the White House, that's coming out of the State Department in the past 48 hours?
Well, I think that it's clear that the messaging has changed, and it's changed for a reason. We aren't privy to what that intelligence is that they have. But I believe if I were an American citizen in Ukraine right now, I would probably be listening to it. They've been recommending that Americans not travel to Ukraine for some time, but the urgency certainly seems to have upticked quite a bit. Saying 24 to 48 hours is pretty specific.
Now, President Biden has touted military interventions as a tool of last resort. Is he going to be able to stick with that principle?
I haven't seen any signs that he won't. I mean, what we've done so far, what the U.S. government has done so far is to really reinforce our NATO allies, which is important, and that's part of our national security structure. But Ukraine is outside of that. Now, that doesn't mean that it's not in the U.S. national security interest to support Ukraine in many other ways short of intervening militarily. But I think that President Biden has shown so far that he's going to stick with it. And I think that there's still many, many other tools in the diplomatic toolbox that he can use and that he's prepared to.
I wonder if you think that the U.S. efforts aimed at deterring Russia are being watched by other U.S. rivals, by China, for example. Do you think this message is spreading more broadly of what the lengths that the U.S. and its allies are willing to go to defer possible invasions?
I certainly think that other countries are watching. And I've heard the criticisms that if we don't use military force to deter Russia inside Ukraine, that's going to have some sort of knock-on effect in other countries. But I don't believe that that's the case. Each of these situations is different, and we have different levels of commitment based on our own national security interests. So I do believe that the way that NATO has come together and that democracies have come together and are prepared to take steps that might even impede our own economies shows a demonstration of real commitment to standing up against this type of aggression against a democracy.
I wonder, what's your take on what you think might happen? Obviously, none of us are privy to the U.S. intelligence and what's going on behind the scenes. But what's your gut feeling about what we might see in the coming days and weeks?
Well, I'd hate to predict anything because a week from now, someone could look at it and say it's very wrong. But I will say that for a while now, I've thought that it sounds as though Russia is on a path to invade. And certainly what we've heard, and even just as recently as today, changing the message means that the United States is ready for that to happen. So particularly for Americans and other expatriates living in Ukraine, I think that they should be considering that those messages are very serious and that war can be very chaotic. And we don't know exactly how this might roll out. But I would be preparing for that. If you're not leaving Ukraine, then preparing for a lot of chaos to happen. And I do think that whatever happens, it's probably going to be very damaging to the people of Ukraine, whether it's a military invasion or some other cyber attacks. I think that they're going to be unfortunately suffering, and hopefully the rest of the world will help deter further action.
Well, stay with us on BBC News. Still to come.